Welcome back to Murder, Mysteries and Mayhem, a collection of cases that have occurred within a 3-hour radius of my hometown of Port Pirie in South Australia. This time we are travelling 2 hours and 50 minutes south to the quiet Adelaide suburb of Raynella and the shocking murder of 82-year-old pensioner Vonne McGlynn. Vonne was an independent, intelligent and well-travelled woman. Lifelong friends and past neighbours Teresa Malloy and Regan Zadow describe her as a beautiful, happy woman who loved family life and the company of her friends. Teresa Malloy adds that Vonne was a feisty woman who didn't tolerate fools or gossip. In November of 2008, Vonne had broken her arm. Despite this, the 82-year-old continued to live independently and volunteer at her local Red Cross centre. She mentioned to her co-workers there that she'd recently had an unsettling incident at home. She said she'd been watching television when someone suddenly began to pound loudly on her front door. The banging made her hesitant to open the door, and by the time she reached the peephole, the person had gone around to the side of the house and was knocking loudly on the window, then moved to the back door and continued. When they returned to the front door, Vonne could see that it was a young woman and wondered whether she might be in some sort of trouble to be knocking so incessantly. Placing the chain across the doorway, she opened it slightly. The woman did not ask, but abruptly announced in a very thick foreign accent that she was there to become Vonne's carer. Vonne politely informed the woman that she did not require the services of a carer, but the woman moved closer and announced, "Yes, I will move in here and be your carer, and you will pay me." Vonne again declined and closed the door. When she saw the woman leave, she cracked the door open enough to see her walk a few yards down the street and enter a nearby house. The incident left Vonne a little shaken, and she mentioned it again when her brother, who lived in Queensland, made one of their regular phone calls. It was shortly after this incident that Vonne McGlynn went missing. The last sighting of the elderly widow came on Wednesday, December 3rd, 2008. A witness saw her walking along Summerfield Avenue toward her home after her usual morning walk to McDonald's for a muffin and coffee. But when the Red Cross rang her, as it did each day as part of its telecross service for the elderly, she never answered the call. The Red Cross alerted her brother in Queensland, and he subsequently reported her to the Christies Beach police station as a missing person. A local patrol went to her home to check on her, but no one answered the door. Nor did anyone respond later that day when police checked for a second time. When she had still not turned up the following day, a patrol crew forced entry into the house. McGlynn was not inside, and the house was not in the meticulous condition in which she always kept it. Someone had moved items around, packed belongings into bags, and left the place generally untidy. Anything of value had been taken, and everything else looked to have been packed up ready to be thrown away. On the dining table were maps and travel brochures, which seemed strategically placed to suggest that McGlynn had gone on a holiday. The uniformed patrols called in South Coast CIB detectives to investigate, and as McGlynn was a missing person, Major Crime Investigation Branch received a subsequent briefing on the status of the case. Just days later, on Tuesday, December 9th, a woman turned up at the ANZ Bank at Morfett Vale, where McGlynn held an account. She was equipped with a forged power of attorney document and bank card and tried to withdraw $2,000 from Vonne McGlynn's savings. She told bank staff that McGlynn had asked her to manage some renovations and attend to some of her affairs, but the deception failed to convince the bank staff, who rang the police and were connected with missing persons Senior Constable Robin Ferraro. The woman was put on the phone with Ferraro and claimed that McGlynn had gone away on holiday, but Ferraro was ill at ease with the story. This led to South Coast CIB Detective Sergeant John Schneelmich and Detective Brevet Sergeant Matt Fitzpatrick to question the woman, whose name was Angelika Gavare, and to search her home at Christie Downs. On December 10th, they found Vonne McGlynn's passport, house keys and bank card, as well as other forged power of attorney documents. Among other items were stolen credit cards and driver's licences. Gavare had a history of fraud and theft and was now starting to delve into forgery. The detectives continued their search out to the shed and backyard, in which a smell like rotting flesh was evident. But there were a couple of small animal carcasses there, Detective Fitzpatrick said, and it appeared that they had also used that back area as a makeshift toilet because they'd done some bathroom renovations. None of that made Gavare any less suspect over the McGlynn disappearance. The detectives arrested her that day, not for murder but for dishonesty offences related to the forged documents. In a subsequent interview, Gavare gave the detectives an account, albeit a false one, of her interaction with McGlynn. Detective Sergeant John Schneelmich said she was just dead cold. She really showed no emotion at all in that interview. It was very strange. The South Coast detectives continue to investigate Gavare with the input from Major Crime. She was a 33-year-old Latvian immigrant and single mother of two, who spoke with a Baltic accent. Fit and healthy, she had physical to carry out her own home renovations. Her mother, Inara Dombrovska, had lived in the same street as Vonne McGlynn. That was how Gavare came to know of her then future, with whom she had no relationship. After forensic response officers examined the McGlynn house on December 18th, South Coast detectives re-interviewed Gavare and seized her car. Luminol revealed big swipes on the floor of the boot, as if someone had cleaned it with bleach. But, Detective Fitzpatrick says, subsequently found DNA in very low amounts, identified as being Vonne McGlynn's. 5 days later, on December 24th, 2008, police declared the McGlynn disappearance a major crime. That left the investigation to continue under the control of the Major Crime Investigation Branch. And in the weeks that followed, the branch managed more searches and door knocks around the McGlynn home and implemented a range of covert strategies. On January 6, 2009, Detective Fitzpatrick set out to conduct a third video interview with Gavare, this time in her home. He intended to take a more forceful approach than he would have normally.
Hi, g'day.
Tired of Angelika's lies and suspecting she's killed Vonne McGlynn, South Australia Police keep up the pressure.
Laura, come in. Just to let you know, obviously take calls on like every time we talk to you.
With multiple visits to...
How you going, Angelika?
Hey, Angelika.
From the place again, remember us? Greeting Andrew from Christmas Beach. Got a minute to talk? We're still looking...
and multiple interviews with...
Is she going to bark at us?
You gonna
the 34-year-old mother of two.
Fitzpatrick cautioned Gavare and told her that he suspected she was involved in the McGlynn disappearance. She responded with a 1.5-hour repeat of the story she'd peddled in previous interviews. After that, Fitzpatrick suggested that she simply cut the shit. He explained that this was her opportunity to tell what had happened for the sake of the family. Everything went silent, he recalls. There was a big pause, and she took a deep breath. I genuinely thought she was going to crack. Gavare simply said she would only speak again through her lawyer. They still hadn't found the body. Detective Fitzpatrick said we looked at other covert techniques to identify where the body might be and gather other corroborative evidence. While we had a pretty good circumstantial case, we were a long way from connecting Gavare to an actual murder. Finally, in a breakthrough they'd been waiting for, Gavare's mother, Inara Dromvoska, agreed to try in conversation to draw the truth from her daughter and provide it to police. In the secretly recorded conversation, Gavare revealed herself as the killer. She explained how she had committed the murder and boasted that police would never find the body or any DNA. According to Gavare's story, as told to her mother, she went to McGlynn's home on December 3rd. It was soon after her victim had left for McDonald's. Gavare broke in through the home's roof space and lay in wait, a method she had used before, according to records later secured from Interpol. When McGlynn returned, she pounced on her, striking the elderly woman on the head with a soapstone statuette. It is unclear whether that blow caused immediate death or unconsciousness and then death. Gavare took her out to the backyard and left her hidden from view. She went out to dinner that night with her daughters, her mother and her boyfriend, Ejaz Ahmed. It was her birthday. She got home around 9 o'clock that night and put the girls to bed, waiting for them to fall asleep, then took the car out and went back to McGlynn's house. Detective Fitzpatrick says, "I believe she placed McGlynn in her car by herself. She's a physically strong woman and capable of doing that." I believe McGlynn was then transported in the car, whether dead or alive, to Gavare's house. Over 2 days in late February 2009, Major Crime brought in Star Group, SES and police cadets to conduct extensive searches of Maiponga Dam and Christie Creek. On February 23rd in Christie Creek, searchers discovered a small section of a human upper thigh in a plastic bag. The next day, a pathologist confirmed that the body part had undergone a hip replacement, belonged to an elderly human with osteoarthritis. Discovered in another search on February 25th was a human upper body, also in a plastic bag, with its head and arms missing. Other items discovered were a blood-stained pram and 2 sections of a large statuette. The leg section was within 100 metres of Gavare's front door, and the torso section found 200 metres away. Forensic science found it extremely difficult to obtain DNA from the remains because they'd been exposed for so long. Ultimately, identification was confirmed via the serial number on the titanium hip. It was Vonne McGlynn. It is believed that Gavare disposed of some body parts in the ordinary rubbish bin collection day. Then, to get rid of the rest, she took her little dog and her children for a walk along the Christie Creek. In the pram were the remains wrapped in garbage bags, which she deposited into the creek. The blood on the pram proved through DNA testing to belong to McGlynn, and Gavare's sister, Agnes Dombrovska, identified the pram as belonging to Angelika. The best answer to how and where the killer dismembered McGlynn's body would come from an interview with Gavare's eldest daughter. Her story was that on December 4th, the day after the murder, Gavare had allowed the girls to play inside. Allegedly suffering a headache, she went to spend some quiet time in the shed. Police believe that that is where the dismembering probably occurred. Detective Fitzpatrick says, "I don't for 1 minute believe that it occurred at McGlynn's house. Due to the logistics, the clean-up needed and the time frame, it would have been very hard for her to do that. We were never able to say definitely what was used, but she had access to an angle grinder and a chainsaw." The time finally came to arrest Gavare on the morning of February 26, 2009. Fitzpatrick and Detective Brevet Sergeant Jason Tank, who Major Crime had seconded from South Coast CIB, had just seen her drop her daughters off at childcare. Dressed up and headed for a job interview, she was now waiting for a bus. The two detectives stepped out of their unmarked car and arrested her. "I've arrested a few people for murder," Fitzpatrick said, but her reaction was stone cold. Absolutely no emotion. When we got in the car, she was almost flirtatious towards us, almost jovial. And on the way to the city watch house, she asked about getting a glass of wine in custody.
A detective behind the camera, another with handcuffs.
You know who I am? You're under arrest for the murder of Vonne McGlynn. Okay.
Angelika Gavare's final moments of freedom before being locked up for the murder of an 83-year-old woman.
So you have to come with us. Come around here.
The then 34-year-old's calm expression barely changes. Perhaps what you'd expect of someone who could dismember a pensioner's body and dump her in a creek.
Angelika, as a person under arrest, you have some rights. You want to explain those rights to you?
This wasn't Gavare's first interaction with detectives. Days earlier, she laughed when she arrived for a police interview, shrugging her shoulders and scoffing at questions. But in the back of this car, there were no smiles.
Do you wish to ring anyone at this point to tell them that you're under arrest?
My solicitor.
Gavare refused to answer any questions, and the magistrates' court granted her bail. A Supreme Court review, however, kept her in custody. More critical evidence came from the seizure of Gavare's computer. Her search history brought up such topics as true crime murders, DNA and power of attorney. On real estate sites, she had looked at how to transfer ownership of houses. Also on her search history were hard rubbish collections and Salvation Army pickup services. And her phone record showed calls to both the Salvation Army and the Onkaparinga Council. Bookings had actually been made for the collection of hard rubbish and household items from McGlynn's address. Her ultimate goal, it seemed, was to take ownership of the house. Initially, Gavare tried to blame her boyfriend, Ejaz Ahmed. He was a taxi driver and they'd been in a relationship for a couple of months. Detective Fitzpatrick said, "We searched his house, seized every power tool he possessed and interviewed him a number of times. He willingly gave statements and put himself at different places that basically alibied him." When she finally faced the Supreme Court charged with murder, she pleaded not guilty and then falsely implicated her former boyfriend, Giuseppe Daniele. Gavare claimed he had run over McGlynn with his car and then forced her to help him ransack the woman's house to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Gavare said that it was at that time it occurred to her that she could profit from the situation by stealing McGlynn's house and making a better life for herself and her children, but maintained she was not the killer. Danielle laughed at the accusation. An alibi and a damning statement given by Gavare's mother, who had not spoken to her daughter since a secretly taped confession, sealed Gavare's fate. The allegation was dismissed by the court. Before considering the sentence, Justice Trish Kelly stated, "Gavare was motivated by nothing more than sheer greed. Notwithstanding the fact that you have been privileged to receive the best legal representation money could buy, there is barely a thing which your counsel could say on your behalf which would provide any sort of mitigation of the circumstances of your crime." Since Gavare had stated that she would never ever tell where McGlynn's head and hands were, the prosecution urged Justice Kelly to consider the new no body, no parole law when sentencing. On August 30th, 2011, Kelly returned a verdict of life with a non-parole period of 32 years. In January 2012, Gavare won the right to appeal her conviction. The appeal was overturned in May 2012. Vonne McGlynn's head and hands have never been recovered. Thank you for watching another murder, mystery and mayhem case. Please remember to hit the like button before you go and subscribe if you'd like to hear more cases. Until next time.